All right. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining me. We'll go ahead and get started here. If you got your questions, you can post them. It should be below the video if you're on a smaller screen like a phone. If you're on a larger screen like a computer, it should be to the right of the video. Let me refresh this. Looks like we just got one question there, and that's going to be a quick one, most likely. Right. Yeah, it's the only question I'm seeing. All right. So it just says, can you show your wrist in slow motion during your entire swing? All right. So I don't do that. The reason I don't do that is because it just doesn't make a lot of sense for me to do that. Just go to YouTube and you can you can search Tiger Woods slow motion golf swing, and there will be tons and tons of videos. And that will be way, way, way better than me demonstrating here, because if I demonstrate it here, you're not going to be able to pause it, slow it down. You're not going to have any control of the video or anything like that. So go to YouTube. Clay also has a video where he shows his swing from many angles in slow motion with different clubs. If you just, let me see, I'll put it in the chat here. I'll put that in the chat. And the video is G106, and the title is called Clay Ballard Golf Swing All Angles. So I'm going to put that in the chat, the link to that video in the chat. What I will say is that's not always I'm not sure exactly why you're wanting to see that. That might be the better question, like why you're wanting to see what the wrists are doing, because what the wrists do are not going to be the same thing from golfer to golfer to golfer, right? What Tiger's wrists do are a little different than what Clay's do, a little different than what Tommy Fleetwood's, a little different than what Rory's does, everybody's a little bit different. So you don't necessarily want to be copy exactly what I would do or whatever. A lot of it's dependent on your grip with the club, and many other factors. So generally, if you have a stronger grip, you're going to have weaker wrist angles. And what I mean by like that would be a weaker wrist angle. So that'd be kind of, when I say weaker, that means it's kind of like opening up the face, right? So if you look here, if I cup my lead wrist, right, you can see how that opens up the face. This is probably a better angle to see it. If I bow my lead wrist and I extend back my chin, you can see how that closes the face down, right? So now imagine I have a very weak grip, and then I cup my wrist a little bit. Well, look at my club face. It's very open, right? Now imagine I have a very strong grip, right? And then I cup my wrist a little bit. Well, now look at that club face. That club face is actually in a pretty decent spot, right? Imagine I have a very strong grip, but then I bowed my wrist. Well, look at that club. That club face is so shut. It's basically going to be impossible for me not to hook this ball, right? If I have a very strong grip, I'm not going to have as much. I probably won't have any bow in my wrist at impact. So you have to be a little bit careful with just trying to do that. What I'd recommend doing is maybe ask why I would ask you, why are you asking the question, right? And then maybe I can help you and get you on the right track. But yeah, if you ever ask to see like, so show me slow motion this, what I'm going to tell you is go to YouTube, because that's really just going to be the best thing for you. That's how I learned a lot of things. The way that I learned a lot of things is I analyzed the golf swings, right? So I just didn't look at like one model and think, or one golf swing like Tiger's golf swing and just try to copy everything there. What I did is I looked at many different golf swings. I tried to look at very different golf swings of the best players, and what you find is a lot of players have different grips with the clubs. They do different things with their wrists, right? You're going to have players that have very similar grips, right? But do different things with their wrists, right? Because of, whatever ball flight they're kind of looking for. If they're a drawer of the ball, they might have stronger wrist angles. If they like to fade it, they might have weaker wrist angles. Because in order to draw it, we need to have the face close to the path. In order to fade it, we need to have it open to the path. So it's not just as simple as what exactly are the wrists doing. I'm just going to do exactly that. I wish it was that simple. But it really isn't. It really isn't that. In fact, that's not simple at all. If you think about it, because it's very difficult to do that. What I would recommend doing is do what you do naturally, right? And then only tweak it if there's a ball flight and contact issue, right? So let's say, for example, let's say you're slicing it and you have a very cupped wrist. That would be a good time to like, okay, I need to get my wrist less cupped, maybe get a little more flat or something like that. So that's kind of the way I would look at it. All right, keep the questions coming here. While y'all come up with questions, I'm just going to be checking my emails and stuff, maybe answering some emails. All right, if you're just hopping on the office hours, I'm just waiting for questions to be asked. So if you got questions, it's a good time to ask. If not, no big deal. If you're just hopping on, just waiting for questions to be asked. So if you got questions, now's the best time to ask. If not, no big deal. If you're just hopping on the office hours, I'm just waiting for questions to be asked. So if you got them, ask. If not, no big deal.
All right, how do you hinge your wrists during the swing? Yes, let's go over this. Grab my club here. All right, so basically at address, we're going to, so here's the best way to kind of think about it. So we have hinge, which is going to be, I would say that that's like thumbs up. You may have heard this referred to as radial deviation, so that's thumbs up. Then thumbs out away from you, that's called ulnar deviation. So when you're in the address position, you're going to be basically going to be ulnar deviation, right? Because the club is kind of hanging more down from your arms. Then as we bring the club back, we kind of go to this first parallel position. The club is only hinged gradually to this point. So it's very, very gradual amount of hinge. It has hinged some. There are some players that really don't hinge the club much at all to this position. Like Bryson, I would say. He's kind of more like this. Like he goes to here, there's like no hinge. But most players you're going to see, most of the best players, you're going to see a small amount of hinge to this position. Then when we get up to lead arm parallel, you're typically going to see around 90 degrees or a little bit more between the lead arm and the shaft. Then at the top of the swing, so I'm gradually kind of going into radial as I get up to the top. At the top of the swing, you're typically going to see about a 90-degree angle between the lead arm and the shaft, pretty close to it. And then as we come down,
we get to this lead arm parallel position in the downswing, that angle will get a little bit smaller, typically, right? Or it will stay the same. There are some players where it stays the same. So like Dustin Johnson, for example, at the top of the swing, he has about 90 between his lead arm and the shaft. And then when he gets here, he has about 90 between the lead arm and the shaft. What you don't see is really high-level players where from the top of the swing, from the start of the top of the swing, that angle between the lead arm and the shaft gets bigger. So basically casting, right? We don't see any of the best players throwing that club out right away from the top of the swing, right? That's casting. And that's why lag is a part of the toss Miguel system, because that's what all the best players do. Every single player is either going to keep the amount of lag that they have at the top of the swing to here, or what most of them do is they will actually get more lag as they get to this position. So in slow motion, it would kind of look like this. Right? And you can see how it created that sharper angle. Now, there's some players that have much sharper angles and some players that have less sharper angles. So like Dustin Johnson, he has like a 90-degree angle, whereas like Sergio Garcia has like a 30-degree angle, right, between the lead arm and the shaft. Then from this position here, actually let's go, because I think this is a great discussion as well. Why is that? Why does Dustin Johnson have basically like a 90-degree angle in the downswing at lead arm parallel? And why does Sergio have a lot less? So part of it is wrist angles, right? So you can do this with me, but as we all know, Dustin Johnson really bows his wrist, right? People have, call it DJing your wrist, right? If you do that, it's going to be harder to go into more radial, like I was talking about. So you can actually do this with me. If you hold the club out in front of you, right? And what I want you to do is I want you to bow your lead wrist. So whatever if you're left-handed, it's going to be right-handed. If you're right-handed, it's going to be your left hand, right? So if I bow my wrist, now try to hinge that club toward. This is as much as I can do, right? On the other side of that, if I cup my wrist, right, I can create a much sharper angle, just because anatomically, when you cup your wrist, you can go into more radial. On the other side of that, when you bow your wrist, when you flex your wrist, you can't go into as much radial because anatomically your wrist just doesn't work that way for most people, right? If you have like a normal functioning wrist. So that's why you're going to see Sergio with a lot more lag for part of it, because he doesn't really bow his wrist. If anything, he has a little bit of cupping in his wrist, just a small amount, which is fine. It's all about controlling the club face. Players control the club face in different ways. But he also shallows out the club a lot more earlier in the downswing than Dustin Johnson does. So if you look at his swing, it's very flat. That club is pretty flat coming down here. So again, if I hold this club straight up and down, and let's say I create as much lag as I can with a flat wrist, right? And then I go like this, I flatten it out. Well, look what happens. Look at my lag. My lag increases. I haven't really actually increased the lag. It's just the appearance of it has increased. That angle between my lead arm and the shaft has gotten smaller because all I've done is that. I've gone from that to that. You can see how it gets smaller. Now, the other thing that creates that is the momentum of the club. And Sergio does that as well. So what that means is when I'm bringing it back, if I change directions with my arms, the club is going to have momentum that's going to create lag. Dustin Johnson doesn't really create lag with momentum like that. So that's why you're seeing a much sharper angle. But going back to this lead arm parallel position, this is the position where you have the maximum amount of lag, right? All players have the maximum amount of lag at this position, or maybe even a little bit later. There are some players, Sergio, for instance, that have that sharper angle between the lead arm and the shaft a hair later than lead arm parallel. Ben Hogan was another one of them. Typically, these are players that have kind of more flatter kind of swings, and that's what Sergio and Ben Hogan had, kind of more on the flat side of the swing. But yeah, they're going to create that sharp. And then from here, this is where the release starts. It's going to gradually increase, right? So basically, as I get to club parallel, typically the hands are going to be right in front of the trail thigh. Then when I get to impact, my hands are typically going to be in front of the lead thigh, and then it's going to release out in front. When I say release, I'm talking about where the club is splitting the forearms, right? So if I kind of hold the club like this, got lag, right? I'm in this position here, club parallel to the ground, hands in front of the trail leg. impact, hands in front of the lead leg, and then release. That's where my club is splitting the forearms, and we want that to be about 45 degrees out in front. And that's where we've completely unhinged everything. We've let go of all the hinge. That's where it's gone. So we've gone from basically no hinge, gradually hinging it to where we're about 90 degrees at the top. Then we typically get more hinge as we're coming down to lead arm parallel. Then we're going to unhinge gradually as we come into impact. But those are the checkpoints, right? Good checkpoint here is club parallel to the ground, hands clear of the body. Good checkpoint here, lead arm parallel in the backswing, club more than 90 degrees between the lead arm and the shaft. 90 degrees is okay too. At the top of the swing, about 90 degrees, give or take. Lead arm parallel in the downswing, less than 90 degrees. We're creating a smaller angle as we get to this point. Club parallel in the downswing, we're going to see hands in front of the trail thigh. Impact, we want to see hands in front of the lead thigh, typically. And then we got release, where I've lost all my angles. That's typically going to be around 45 degrees out in front, give or take. There are some players that release it a little bit earlier, like a Martin Keimer. He's releasing it like 28 degrees, 29 degrees out in front. Then you got like a Dustin Johnson who releases it like 55 degrees out in front. Then you have everybody that's somewhere in between, right? Those are kind of the guys that are kind of bookending the range there. But that's typically what you're going to see as far as hinging in the wrist among the best players. All right, keep questions coming. We got about 20 minutes left here. Excuse me. All right, how do you become a long hitter? That's a good question. So, what would I call a long hitter? I would call a long hitter. Um, I would say if you are 280 plus, I would put you into the long hitter category because you got to think about it. The average, and that this would be for men. For ladies, I would say 240 for sure, 240, 250 plus. But for the men, I would say 280 would be. I would call that a long hitter. So the average male is about 95 miles per hour club head speed, and that's going to be roughly 230, I think is like the average, right? So I would say a long hitter would be 280 plus, right? So to hit the ball 280 plus, what do we need to have happen? Well, one, we need a certain amount of club head speed to hit it that far, right? A good way to think about it is you get about 1 yard, um, or excuse me, you get about 2.6 yards for every mile per hour, right? So to make the math easy, if you swing 100 miles an hour, that's going to be roughly about 260 yards, right? So, but again, that's not long hitters. So let's do the math here. If I take, just do on my calculator here. If I go 280 and I divide that by 2.6, that's going to give me the miles per hour that I would need. And it says 107.69. And I would say, if you want to do that on a consistent basis, and some of it may depend on where you live, right? But if you want to do that on a consistent basis, I would say 110 would kind of be the threshold of club head speed that you want to be at to be what I would consider, in my opinion, to be a long hitter, right? That's the limiter, right? If you're not swinging 110 miles an hour, you're not going to consistently hit it 280 yards, right? And you know, in some places you might, right? So, for example, let's say you play somewhere where it's very, very firm and you get a lot of rollout. Sure, you could swing 105 and probably get 280 if you're getting a lot of rollout. But when you travel and you go somewhere, you come to Florida, maybe where I'm at, your driving distance is going to go down. You're going to wonder what in the world, why am I not hitting it very far? Well, the difference is you're not getting 40 yards a roll like you were before, when in hard fairways. The other thing is that elevation. If you're playing at really high elevation, if you're playing up in the Rockies, or maybe the places in Mexico where they play that tournament where it's at high elevation, they got to add like 15% to all their shots. Okay, yeah, in that situation you could, but in normal conditions, you got to be swinging about 110 because if you're swinging 100, it's not going to go 280 unless you get very lucky, right? You're going to need downwind. You're going to need an elevation drop. You're going to need cart path bounce. You're going to need a squirrel to grab your ball and advance it 20, 30 yards, right? Those are not things we can really depend on, right? If we want to average 280, be a long hitter, it comes with 110 mile an hour club head speed, right? We also, with that club head speed, so keep this in mind. Just because you have great club head speed doesn't mean you're always going to hit it a mile, right? I have a buddy that swings 117, 118 miles an hour, right? And that's about is, I would say it's actually right now it's a little bit more than what I swing. I'm usually around like the 110 to 115 range right now, but he swings a little bit faster than me, and I almost always outdrive him. And the reason is because I'm hitting the ball out of the middle of the face, and he's hitting it off the heel, or excuse me, off the toe every time, right? And when you hit the ball off the toe, you're not going to transfer as much of that energy to the ball. So that's the other thing. We got to be hitting the ball in the sweet spot, and we can't be cutting across the ball. If you're hitting a big slice, cutting way across the ball, you're not going to get you're not going to be that big hitter either, right? So we need a certain amount of club head speed. 110, I would say, would be what you would need to have safely, and we need to be able to make solid contact and then have our face in our path, meaning the direction the club face is pointing versus the direction the club head is moving through impact. So am I swinging too much out to in, like an over the top, too much into out, too much from the inside, that can cause the ball to hook, right? Those shots that have a ton of curve on them just aren't going to go very far, right? Those are the things that we need, all right? So for club head speed, if you're wanting to work on club head speed, I highly recommend our 20-minute distance fix course. That course is all about gaining club head speed. It goes over all the main things, the low-hanging fruit things that we see that help you to get club head speed. If anything, there's a quick start little video in there. If anything, I highly recommend that you do that, and then that kind of primes you for the program, and then I would work through the program. But go check out that quick start; it's a really good one. But basically, the things that we work on in there are, one, we want to create more space, right? So we create more space by getting a good turn, right? That's how you create more space. The reason why you want to create more space is that if we have more space, we have more room to accelerate the club. And that can ultimately help you to create more club head speed. Think about it. If you're going sledding and you want to have the fastest speed at the bottom of the hill, what kind of hill are you going to look for? You're going to look for the tallest and the steepest hill, right? That's what we want to do in the golf swing, right? We want to get our arms up there and we want to get a big turn, right? If I make a swing that's only like this and, swing as hard as I can, and then I make a swing where I'm more like this and I swing as hard as I can, the one with the bigger turn is going to go farther because I had more time to exert force onto this handle, which helps me to create speed, right? So that's what we do out of the gate. We do the step drill to get our momentum working in the right direction and use the ground to create torque and fire the club head harder, right? Well, we talk about loading and unloading the club, right? So think about it this way. If I were to make a swing that was like this versus a swing that's like that, where I'm lagging up, I'm loading up the club and then releasing it, I'm going to get more speed. So we work on that in there. So lots of things in there to help you to gain club head speed, right? So that's why I recommend checking out. You can get to the 20-minute distance fix by clicking the instruction tab at the top and then clicking the 20-minute distance fix from the drop down there. Now, as far as hitting it in the middle of the face, I would use foot power spray. Spray it on the club face. I actually have a driver here. You can see how it's got foot power spray sprayed on it. You can see, I can clearly see where I struck the club face. So you want to see if you have some sort of bias, right? You might find maybe you hit a handful of balls, you hit 10 balls, and you find that your grouping is kind of more out toward the toe, right? Well, you'll want to work on getting that grouping more in the heel. Well, the way you do that is practice hitting some shots in the heel, then tone it down, and then practice hitting shots off of different parts of the face. That's going to help you to get better at hitting it in the middle, right? If your club path is off, if you've got tons of curve on the ball, then I recommend you check out the 20-minute shallowing fix. That's going to help you to get that club nice and shallow in a good spot. Basically, what you do in there is you get the ball hooking, then you tone it down to get the ball where you want to. And then what I would do is I would practice hitting draws and fades. Practice hitting it, even though, maybe you used to slice the ball and you never want to slice the ball again. That's not the mindset that you want to have. You want to be able to slice the ball. You also want to be able to hook the ball. You want to be able to do both on command. That's going to show that you have control of your face and your pass. So it's great to practice alternating hitting draws and fades, so that way you can get good at kind of honing that in. So that's kind of the recipe, I would say, to become a long hitter. Number one, acquire the club head speed that is needed to be a long hitter. I would say 110 miles an hour is what you would need to hit at about 280. If you want to hit at 300, you're going to need about 115 consistently to be able to do that, right? You want to make sure that you're transferring all that energy to the golf ball, right? So that's going to be doing strike training. Check to see if you have a bias to hit on some part of the face, correct that bias, work on intentionally alternate hitting on different parts of the face to improve your awareness of the sweet spot. And then check to make sure that you aren't putting too much curve on the ball. If your ball's going straight and you're hitting in the middle of the face, you don't need to do this. But if you're curving the ball a ton, right, you've got 30, 50 yards of curve on your drives, that's losing you distance, especially if it's slice. Well, hook can lose you distance too, but especially if it's slice. And work through that 20-minute shallowing fix. Again, click the instruction tab, click the 20-minute shadowline fix from the drop down there. Work on getting that ball to draw a little bit, and then work on hitting draws and fades alternating between the two, so that way you can get control of your face and your bat and be an accurate long hitter as well. So George says, what are your thoughts on lead dominant versus trail dominant swings? Is one better than the other? No, I will tell you this. I don't think about that. Right. There's no, to me, you're using both sides of your body in the golf swing. Right. The lead side is more like kind of like throwing a Frisbee, and the trail side is like skipping a rock. Right. You're using both sides in the swing. So I don't really believe in you can feel like your lead side or trail side dominant, but I don't really believe that that's really what's happening, right? You're using both, right? So that's the way that I would look at it. I don't really look at it that way. You're using both sides of your body to swing the golf club. When you swing a baseball bat, right? Do you think about being lead side or trail side dominant? I've never heard that, right? I hear it in golf all the time, but that's not really what happens. You're using both sides of your body. You shift to your trail side, you bring the club back, and then you get to your lead side. I mean, if you really want to think about it, if you are a right-handed golfer, you are trail side dominant. Now if you're a left-handed golfer that swings from the right side, right? I guess you're swinging. I guess you'd be lead side dominant. So whatever is your dominant hand, that's the dominant side of your swing, right? That's the way I would kind of look at it. To me, I think that overcomplicates it. Something that's just not it unnecessarily complicates it a little bit for me. Now, I will say, if you are someone that is feeling like you're lead side dominant, you're hitting great shots, keep doing that. That's completely fine. That's a feel. Feels are relative to the golfer. Some golfers are going to feel one thing and it's going to be great for them. Another golfer can feel the same thing or try to feel the same thing, and it can be terrible for them, right? It's all relative to the golfer. So I'm not saying you can't feel like you're lead side dominant and hit it great, or feel like you're trail side dominant and hit it great, but that's just not literally what's happening. You're using both sides of your body. If anything, you're using your dominant side more because it is your dominant side. But yeah, that's essentially what's going on there. So the way I would look at it, I would break it down to, okay, what does it take to hit a good shot? What needs to happen at impact? It needs ball first contact, center face contact, and then the club face and the club path to be in a pretty neutral direction to help you to hit the ball in the direction of the target, right? That's what needs to happen. So you move your body in a way that helps you to do that. If feeling like you're trail side dominant helps you to do that better, then by all means do that. If feeling like you're lead side dominant helps you to do that, then by all means do that. But it's not literally, what's happening. No problem, George. Glad to help. How do I correct toe hits? Try to hit the ball off the heel. Change your intention to hitting the ball off the heel. Right now, you're trying to hit the ball in the center, but sounds like you're hitting it off the toe, right? So change your intention to hitting it off the heel, and that should move the strikes more to the toe. If it doesn't, exaggerate it more. Exaggerate it as much as you need to move the strike more to the center of the face. Now, don't be afraid to do this and feel like it's like a Band-Aid, or feel like it's I don't want to try to feel like I'm hitting the ball off the heel forever. That's not really what's going to end up happening. We adapt, just like you probably haven't been hitting it off the toe your whole life, right? You probably were hitting it, at least somewhat in the middle of the face, and then started hitting the ball off the toe, right? Sometimes we just get a little bit off, and then we need to recalibrate. So this hitting it off the heel, keep doing that. Eventually, you're actually going to start hitting the ball off the heel. Your feel is going to match what you're actually doing. Now at that point, you can go back to trying to hit the ball in the middle of the face. That's what I'd recommend doing. And if you do enough reps, it will happen faster. So go to the range, try to hit a bunch of shots off the heel, try to get a bunch of shots off the heel, try to get several in a row off the heel, try to get like 5 in a row off the heel, then tone it down a little bit to get it more in the center of the face. And then from there, once you kind of get things neutralized, to keep it neutralized, then I would practice hitting shots off both the heel and the toe and the center, alternating between those. And keep in mind, these aren't going to be good shots. When you hit the ball off the heel and off the toe, they're not going to be good shots. They're going to feel terrible, and they're most likely not going to be like good golf shots. Don't worry about that. It's not about hitting a great golf shot. It's about training your ability to hit the ball in the middle of the face. So the better you are at hitting it on the heel and the toe, the better you will be at hitting it in the middle of the face as well. So that's what I would recommend doing. Now there could be technical things in your swing that lead to toe strikes. The most common thing would be coming over the top, right? The reason is that when you swing out to in, right? If I'm swinging out to in like this, the club is working toward me. The sweet spot's working toward me, which is going to tend to make me hit it more on the toe, right? I want the club to be kind of kicking out to the ball, so that way I can hit it more in the center of the face and have control of it. So if that's what's happening, then I'd highly recommend working through the 20-minute shadowing fix to get the ball kicking or get the club kicking out to the ball, as opposed to cutting across the ball. And that will help you to, because that could have been what's kind of getting you off track. But even if, let's say you're coming over the top, even if you're doing that, you can still improve your strike in the middle of the face by doing what I talked about originally. So what I talked about initially is that will help anyone who's hitting it off the toe, right? If they just stick to that and commit to it. That's the thing too. You got to commit to it. I find that a lot of people, they come to me and they'll be like, it didn't work. You have to really commit to it. I know it's not the easiest thing to try to do something that's wrong, but that you got to commit to it, and then eventually it will get better. So that's what I would recommend doing. But yeah, if you're struggling with an over-the-top swing, I highly recommend the 20-minute shadowing fix to get to that course. Click the instruction tab at the top, and then click the 20-minute shadowing fix from there. That will help get the club working to the ball the way that it needs to. All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining me. We'll be back here tomorrow, Tuesday, 11 a.m. Eastern time. Everybody have a great evening, and I will talk to you next time.